Now,
Okay, great. Welcome, everyone. This online webinar is part one of the Bringing Acceptance and Commitment Therapy Skills into Your Daily Life. It's a series hosted by Utah State University's ACT Research Group, and this webinar will be recorded. Our presenters today, my name is Dakota Pond and I'm a certified social worker and I work at the Sorensen Center for Clinical Excellence and I'm today's moderator. So our presenters today will be Jen Barney and Julie Peterson, but before we jump into the presentation, many of you may know about the Sorensen Center and others may not, so I will provide just a quick introduction to the center before we move forward with our webinar. The Sorensen Center consists of various clinics and professionals who provide services like early intervention classrooms, hearing and balance services, speech language therapy, behavior support services, housing and financial counseling, social work, psychology, marriage and family therapy, an assessment team, and psychiatry services. If anyone would like more information about any of these services, you can contact me via email or my office phone number, which is at the bottom of this slide. So a couple of quick things. We are asking that you all remain muted unless you're asking a question, but we will allow you to ask questions throughout the presentation or the webinar so that it can be interactive. You can also send questions in the chat to everyone or privately to me. We will have a Q&A during the last 15 minutes of this presentation. And then we will also have a box link to this recording that will be available upon request. So today's webinar, like I mentioned, is led by Jen Barney and Julie Peterson. They are part of USU's ACT Research Group and are doctoral students in the Combined Clinical Psychology program in the Emma Eccles Jones College of Education and Human Services. So we'll go ahead and turn it over to Jen and Julie.
thanks so much, Dakota. I think, should we switch to sharing my screen now? Okay. Jen and I just have, okay. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Cool. So Jen and I just have a few slides today, just as a visual guide. But before we get into that, we'll just introduce ourselves a little bit more. Dakota already gave you a little bit of a intro, and I see some familiar names in the audience, so I might not need to introduce myself that much. But I'm Julie. I'm a third-year student in the clinical counseling program at USU. I work with Dr. Michael Tuig, and I'm mainly focused my research on acceptance and commitment therapy, particularly in kids and teens. Yeah, Jen?
Yeah, and again, Dakota did a great job introducing us, but for those of you who I don't know, I'm Jen Barney. I'm a fourth year, which is crazy to say, but a fourth year in the Combined Clinical Counseling program. I also work under Dr. Tuig, and our lab is jointly run by Dr. Michael Levin as well. My interests are also in acceptance and commitment therapy, and specifically applying them to difficult to treat mental health disorders and eating disorders in particular. So yeah, we're really excited to share this with you all and also share a little bit about how ACT can be applied to literally anyone who's living a human life, rather than just thinking about it as a therapy for people who are struggling with mental health disorders. So with that, Julie, take it away.
Yes, yeah, thank you for saying that. I wholeheartedly agree. Okay, so let's just start off by thinking about what a value is. So this webinar is supposed to be focused on living a meaningful life during COVID. I don't want to be a disappointment, but I don't think we're going to give you all the secrets to life in this hour period. But we are hoping to give you some skills in terms of focusing your life on things that you care about and that are meaningful to you. So with that said, what is a value? Obviously, I'm sure some of you are familiar with values, but when we say value in the context of acceptance and commitment therapy, we're talking about like freely chosen qualities of life that you are hoping to make your life about. So it's things that are meaningful to you, that you would choose to care about, even if there was nothing, you had no responsibilities, nothing going on. So that seems very simple, but that's kind of the overall idea. So values are freely chosen, and it's a direction that you want to move in. So a direction you want your life to mean something, that's the direction you want to go in. Jen, anything you want to add?
No, I think you did a great job. I guess I'll just clarify, like with the freely chosen piece of it, as Julie said, like it can sound really simple, but if you take a minute and think about all of the different like messages we get from media and our families and maybe your religious culture and all of these things, sometimes that can be conflicting and confusing, and it's like, what should I do as a good person, or what should I do to fit in here? And so when we're saying freely chosen in our values, it's sort of that, as Julie said, if like you had no one else around you and you had none of these rules or guidelines to follow as a good person, what would you really care about? What would you spend your time doing? And so it gets more complicated when we have to start to separate ourselves from all of the things coming in about like what good people do or all of those messages.
Yeah. So now just to clarify a little bit further, so there is a big difference between values and goals. And we just wanted to highlight that here because a lot of people think like, okay, well, I really care about education. So like my value might be something like graduating college or, taking like an online course or going to this webinar. But actually a value is something, like I said before, that's a direction, and there isn't really an ending point. So as an example, first, to go back to what I was saying before, someone who values education, who values knowledge, the distinction between that and a goal might be something like graduating college or, getting a certain degree, getting a specific form of training, where a value is just like, I care about learning, I care about knowledge. So it's a bit broader than a goal itself. Okay, so now Jen is gonna lead us in a quick exercise to dive right in.
Yeah, so as you can all see on the screen, there's a blank tombstone. And as you probably all know, when people die, often what's left behind isn't so much what they had in their lives or like some of the things that we often prioritize, but it's more what you stand for that typically is remembered or talked about by your family and friends. And that's sort of what tombstones are. It usually says, here lies person's name, and then was a loving mother or was a caring friend, whatever it might be. And an epitaph is really what on the person's tombstone to sum up what their life stood for and what they put their life in service of. So in essence, it's a way of summing up in the end what you want your life to be about. So thinking about this, we want to give you all a second to just imagine that one day you will have a tombstone, hopefully very far in the future for all of us, but you'll have a tombstone, and we want you to think about what you want it to sum up about your life. Nothing's been written on it yet, so thinking about from here on out, if you got to choose at the end of the life you're living now what it was going to say, what would you want to be written on that tombstone for you? So starting to think about that, imagine you get to the end of a really full, meaningful life, a life that you would say was well lived. You did things you cared about. You spent your time engaged in activities that were meaningful for you. What would you want that inscription to ideally say? And so I'm gonna just pause for 2 or 3 minutes to give you some time to think about that and maybe jot down a few words or a sentence or two that would really sum that up for you. feel free to keep thinking about this as we move on. And if you are done, or if you've come up with a couple things to answer that question now, I want you to try something else. Now, I want you to imagine that today was the last day of your life. You die, and your tombstone needs to now have an accurate reflection of what your life has stood for up until this point. So what have you been prioritizing in your life? What have you spent your time doing? Where has your time and effort gone? And what would that tombstone say? Would it be the same as the one you just wrote? Would some of it be different? Just start thinking about, what if today was the day we had to write what was going to go on your tombstone about how you lived your life up until now? What do you think it would say? And just start looking at how it relates to that ideal one that you created a few minutes ago. So I'll give you another minute or two to think about that, and then Julie will keep us going forward.
Okay, guess we'll give everyone maybe a few more seconds just to wrap it up. I know this can be kind of a weird exercise to do. Might not put you in the mood you thought you were going to be in. But okay, so I'm hoping that you all have at least a rough outline of those two separate tombstones and like thoughts and ideas. So, sorry. Okay, so now what I want you all to do is to look at what you wrote down and start to pull out some values that you can read or maybe see within those things that you wrote down. So like, for example, you may have written down like having been like a good parent, for example. And so that might draw on a value of like family. Or there might be other things like valuing like justice or compassion, kind of these like broader words that maybe can be pulled from maybe the more specific things that you wrote down, or maybe you wrote down these broader words. Either is fine. And then just start thinking about how those values connect to domains in your life. So typically when talking about values, if we're trying to kind of do a crash course like we are right now, we encourage people to think about them in some domains. So thinking about like work or education, you might be in school, maybe your current job, leisure, stuff you do for fun or hobbies that you have, relationships. So that would be a place where like family or friends might show up, and then personal growth or health. And of course, I would encourage you to add any domain that might not be here. So I know Jen mentioned spirituality or religion, and though that realm can honestly fit in like most domains. So you could create a separate domain if that feels right to you. There's definitely not one right way to do this. But just starting to think about how those values fall into those different domains. So I'll give just like 1 minute for you to kind of sort them, and you can write it down, or you can just do it in your mind. Okay. So now we have what's called the values bullseye. So you can either kind of draw your own bullseye or just look at it on the screen, whatever feels right to you. So with this bullseye, let me get a pointer. Can everyone see this red pointer? Okay. This bullseye is supposed to represent how close and far away you are from living your values in these domains in your regular life. So if you're thinking about your values within work and education, if you think you're right in the bullseye, you're always living by your values, then you would put yourself here. But if you're thinking, like, I really care about like productivity at work, but frankly, I'm not very productive, then you might be like more on the outskirts. You're not really consistent with those values. Most people fall somewhere in the middle, right? That's usually how it goes. People aren't usually like two extremes. But just take a minute to note where you might fall on your own bullseye. Thinking about those values that you pulled from the tombstone or the epitaph, and you sorted them into these domains, and now considering all of that together, where are you falling? Do you think you're falling like, oh, I'm fully living by these values, or I'm not very, very close with them? And it could also just be like today, maybe in particular, or it could be looking at your life as a whole, whatever timeline makes sense for you. So I'll give people like maybe 1 minute to kind of think about that.
And I'll just jump in and add, because I think this is going to be important as we think about moving into like how this relates to our lives and COVID going forward. Julie mentioned sort of like, okay, am I as productive as I want to be? Or am I doing the things I want to do? Which really coincides with some of those goals we mentioned, which can be values consistent. Your goals or the things you want to achieve can fall into these valued domains. And another piece of that that's important is how present were you and how much were you connected with the meaningful aspects of those behaviors? So I like to give personal examples for this, which often leads me to fall into the education realm as well, because as Julie and I mentioned, we're students. But thinking about this, if I am currently writing my dissertation, but there are times where I'm sitting there thinking about how terrible writing papers that are really long and sometimes boring is. And I'm really connecting more with my negative thoughts about that activity, or how difficult it is, or how much I'd rather be doing something else, rather than really connecting to how is this going to move me in the directions I want to go. And so even though, yes, maybe at the end of that hour period, I've somehow busted out a paragraph in my dissertation, I might still move myself a little bit further away from the bullseye, because a lot of this is how meaningful that activity was to you in the moment and how you can connect with it in a fulfilling way, rather than letting some of those distressing thoughts or feelings about the activity push you away from really feeling like you're connecting with that value. So that's another thing to consider, is we're not always just looking at the outcome, but we're also looking at the quality of that outcome.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because the process is so important. Because I'll share a personal example for myself, just so people have like different ideas, I guess. So thinking about like, I really care about like fitness and health. I really like to like go for runs, but sometimes I'm like, okay, I just need to get the run done for the day. Like I just need to cross this off my list and move forward. And I'm not really like fully connecting to enjoying the run, or feeling the benefits of it being outside, that sort of thing. Things that I care about, but when I'm like caught up in something else, it's not as values-based, I guess, as it could be. I'm not as connected with my values as I could be. Okay, so I guess everyone, that was a good amount of time. So I hope everyone has kind of like a sense of where they are in the bullseye. I just want to pause here before we go to the next section, just to see if anyone has any like questions or thoughts or reactions. It's okay if people also want to keep it personal and private, but just wanted to open up that space in case anyone wanted to share. Okay. I kind of thought people would want to lay low in the webinar. Okay. Anyway, moving on to COVID-19. So Jen's gonna take the wheel at this one.
Yeah, so as we mentioned at the beginning of this, we want to really connect this to how You can continue living a meaningful and values consistent life, or even start doing so in maybe some of the domains you realized you're a little further away than you'd like to be from the bullseye amidst a global pandemic. I think if you're anything like me, you've probably struggled with a lot of life changes in the past 6 months. A lot has moved on to Zoom, such as what we're doing now. And a lot of things that we often want to do, maybe traveling to visit family, going out to eat at a restaurant and not having to worry about wearing a mask, or seeing someone, or be coming in contact with COVID, all are things that we didn't have to think about 6 months ago and are really, really stressful and distressing to probably all of us as social human beings. That being said, we can still continue moving in meaningful and valued directions if we start to think about this in a flexible way. And that's sort of how Julie and I want to guide the rest of this conversation, to help you think creatively and flexibly about how maybe, even if it looks different than the version of your values consistent life that you had 6 months ago, you can still connect with that meaningful and fulfilling aspect of these things. So first, thinking about what are the barriers or things that have gotten in the way for you in terms of pursuing your values. So you can think about it silently. If people have things that are showing up for them and want to toss them into the comments, I'm happy to read them aloud or address them. But starting to think about, like, what are the specific things that you feel like have gotten in your way of really living out the valued life that you imagine living?
And try to be specific. So don't just say COVID, right? So it might be, so like a personal example for me might be, like, I really care about knowledge and education. Obviously, I'm in grad school, so like I'm really into that. And something that's getting in the way for me is all the classes are online, and it's so tempting to like also be sending emails or texting my friends or doing something else online, because my mind is like, oh, well, you can do both at once. Even though that means it's not very values consistent, right? Because I'm not really paying attention. I'm not fully engaged in class. So it could be something you're doing or not doing. Thinking about like specific barriers that are personal to you beyond like COVID and its restrictions.
So as we keep going, if you guys think of any that you want to throw into the comments, like I said, we're happy to address them, or if you have questions about them later, we can do that. Julie mentioned a really good one for students, I think, is that tempting pull to not actually be engaging in your classes. I know another one for myself as a clinician is that belief that being behind a screen, I don't have the ability to help my clients as well as if I was in person with them. And I think sometimes that discourages me or makes me already assume we're disconnected before even going into a session. So really, in that sense, just kind of putting a damper on my perspective and almost creating this sense of like, well, it's already going to be disengaged, so what's the point? So sometimes it can be these thoughts that we have about the situation. I think I also mentioned a few. I'm from the East Coast, so my family's all the way across the country, as is Julie. So thinking about maybe you're not able to travel as freely and see family. The holidays are coming up, so I'm sure that's on people's minds. So yeah, there's a lot of things that show up. Also, I just had one come in, missing out on work outreach or community events. So yeah, a lot of us either do activities through work or through a community organization that are often group-based. I know a lot of people who used to do like intramural sports or volunteer work, and that's not necessarily a thing that we get to do as frequently anymore. Or if we do, it's often individual or very restricted in how we can engage. So thinking about that, now we want to start thinking more flexibly about, you guys, everyone a few minutes ago just completed their values bullseye, came up with these values words or kind of descriptors, and start thinking about ways that maybe you didn't originally imagine they could show up, but that still fulfill that same aspect of meaningfulness. So it could be as simple as going to class and committing to putting all other electronics away for the hour and a half that you have, and committing to being fully engaged. Maybe it's setting the goal of asking at least one question in that class to make sure you are actively participating and connecting with other people, putting your thoughts out there. Maybe with your family, it's writing them letters. I think a lot of us have disengaged from snail mail because we have all of these great new ways to travel or talk. But it can be a really nice way to let someone know you care about them and connect with them, even if you haven't done it in years. So start imagining ways that maybe take 10 minutes, maybe can take a whole day, but ways that you could still connect with the meaningful aspects. So if your value is showing like love for the people you care about, how can you let them know you love them amidst COVID? Or with education, how can you continue to grow and learn and connect with your peers even in a Zoom class? Because I think a lot of times we get stuck in these, how is COVID getting in my way? How is it preventing me from doing all these things I want to do? And we spend a lot less time thinking about, how could I connect with the things that I care about, regardless of how other people are doing it as well. So trying to put aside those thoughts of, I could do this, but people might judge me, or I could do this, but it's weird, or things like that. And just saying, is this going to allow me to move in the direction I want to go? Is it going to take me one step closer on the bullseye to my own valued life? Really, the goal here is to connect you with the meaningful aspects of your life, even when it's hard to do so. Mm-hmm. For myself, it's really hard to sit in a Zoom class for 3 hours. Grad school classes are often 3 hours, so prepare yourselves if any of you are planning for that. But thinking about that, it can be hard and sometimes boring or easily distracting to do that. And so another thing that's important to think about is this doesn't always have to feel great. We don't have to have fun every time we're living consistent with our values. But if we can recognize it as something that's values consistent, connect with that meaning, and when those thoughts show up of, this is boring, or I want to do something differently, say, is that really going to help me move forward in my valued directions? And if not, how can I shift my attention to what is meaningful to me? And that's a practice that you'll probably have to keep doing as you expand your values repertoire the way we're talking about.
Yeah, and also just encouraging people too to just think outside the box too. So some other values that like clients have said to me, or that I've talked with people about, that seem hard to engage with during COVID, if you think about them maybe in a new way, it can open up all these different doors. So some examples might be really caring about like justice and your community. So you might think, oh, well, I don't want to go out and protest, or I feel like I can't volunteer as well. But there's lots of places that have online volunteers. Or, you know, if one of your values might be adventure and you can't travel, thinking about, like maybe I'll take a run on a different path than I normally would. Or for people in Utah, like I'll try a new hike or something different. Even though it's not, you know, flying to Paris or something like that, at least it's bringing you towards that intrinsic quality that you really care about, that you like to connect to. So just practicing thinking flexibly and outside the box. And like Jen said, knowing that it's not always something that feels good. You're not like, ah, yes, I feel connected to my values. Like sometimes it can be really difficult. So then that being said, what we want to spend the rest of the time doing is, before questions, is setting an intention for the week. So we just had you write out like a bunch of different values, consider all these different domains. Now we're going to ask you to narrow everything down again and just pick one value. It could be overlapping values, but one specific value that you want to move towards this week. And ideally it would be something that's meaningful to you and that's also realistic and achievable. And we want to help you set a small goal for the week with this value in mind. So what I have up here is SMART goals. I think a lot of people are familiar with this. I know it's like taught on and off in all different contexts, but I have it up here just in case people want maybe a more specific guide for setting a goal. But take a moment to pick the value and then think of something that you can reasonably do in the next week, however big or small the step. And you can use the SMART goal guidelines to help. So that would be making it something that's specific, measurable. So kind of like what Jen was saying, I'll volunteer or I'll speak in class once. You can measure that one time. Attainable, we got to make sure it's a reasonable thing, relevant and connected to your values, and time-based, which we sort of already set it being in the next week. But if you want to do maybe like once a day or 5 minutes a day of something like that. So we'll take a minute and I might ask that someone shares what they're thinking of, so we can get a sense. Otherwise, Jen and I can just share some examples. And of course, feel free to ask any questions if you're kind of stuck on not sure which value to pick or anything like that. I see we have some chats. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So I think some chats were sent privately, some were public. So we have one that came into me was valuing feeling connected with others. And the SMART goal was to reach out to a friend that this person hasn't talked to in a while and schedule a phone call. What I love about this SMART goal in particular is that it does not rely on the friend to do something. It's all on this person to reach out and kind of take that first step, because sometimes people make goals that like, oh, talk to a friend on the phone, but you can't always force people to be on the phone, and maybe your friend's busy, or maybe it just like doesn't work out. But this first step is a great goal to have. And then another one we have is spending an hour this week creatively expressing myself. I like that a lot. I think it connects to values of creativity maybe. And let's see, here's another one. Value loving, writing postcards to each of my sisters. I really like that a lot. I think that connects to what Jen was saying about snail mail. And also 30 minutes of walking in my neighborhood 3 days this week. I love that. It's a very specific goal. Just trying to remember to link that value to it. I'm sure you did, just in the chat, I don't see it. Let's see. give people some time if they want to still think about it. Jen, it looked like you wanted to say something. Do you want to add anything?
Great process comment, Julie. Yeah, I was just gonna say also, as you think about these intentions and set them for the week, um, uh, a caveat that I always like to mention, whether I'm working with clients, doing it myself, or just talking to a friend, is really as you go to fulfill this, as much as you can, remember why you set the intention and try to connect more with the why than the what in particular. I think a lot of us are also really good at making our values become rule-based or rigid. I find that a lot, especially in my health related goals. I often will set like very specific, like I'm gonna go run this far or do things. And sometimes life gets in the way of that as a grad student, also very busy. So being able to remember the why of that and hold it flexibly, like obviously we want you to go out and feel empowered to pursue these intentions. And then also remembering if we create rigid rules that we feel like we can't break or that we have to follow, we've undone the meaningful, fulfilling aspect of that value, and we've now created yet another sort of what I should do. And that's not the goal of this. The goal of this is to really help you connect and put time where you want to in each week. So if I want to be putting my time into my education, setting goals that I can really say, like, I'm proud at the end of the day. One of our things that our advisor says a lot is, if you woke up tomorrow, would you be proud of how you lived yesterday? So it may not be like, yeah, that was the best day ever and I had so much fun. It could be, that might look like that sometimes, but sometimes it's, yeah, I was really productive and it was really long and mundane, but I'm really proud of that outcome. So I like to do this in both ways, is like, what would future Jen say about this? And then also in the future, looking back, saying like, what would I have wanted to change about yesterday? How could I have connected more with the things I care about? Or how could I have devoted 10 more minutes to the things that I want? What you wrote on that epitaph earlier. How can I devote 10 more minutes of my time to pursuing that valued life that I want my life to stand for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like what you just said, especially the part about shoulds. Because you got to watch out once you start feeling like the shoulds are creeping in. Often that means you're moving like away from the bullseye. Not always, but often, in terms of really contacting what those values and their meaning to you. Like what we kind of talked about before, how you can be doing something that's values based, but doing it in a way that is actually moving you further away.
Yeah.
Just
So that,
keeping your eye out.
yeah, I was going to say, so that why of like, am I doing this because I think other people will judge me because I don't, or because I feel like a good person would, or because um, someone, like I'm competing. I also have to catch my little competition voice sometimes, who's like, oh, so and so did this better than me, so I have to do more. Yeah, those are often ways where on the surface we can kind of say like, but it sounds really values consistent. I wrote a paper, or I ran for an extra 10 minutes. But if we look at the why, I think all of values-based behavior is about the why. Why are we doing this, and how are we connecting with it? So I think really checking in with yourself and asking yourself that why can really help you realize, is this a forwards move? Is this moving me towards the bullseye? Or is this maybe like accidentally taking me a step back?
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to share one more example from the chat, because someone messaged and said they're combining two values. And I thought this was really cool. So I wanted to share with the group in case someone might be having trouble choosing between two or like coming up with something. So this person is combining values of creativity and friendship. And their goal is to start a crochet project for their friend who just had a baby. So I think that's pretty cool because it combines two. And I just wanted to like highlight that, because we were kind of talking about being aware of rigidity and knowing, like, or I guess noticing this idea that, okay, I have to move towards each of these individually. It can be more flexible and fluid. Cool. Well, sorry, I don't know if everyone can hear that dog barking outside. I unfortunately don't have a dog. I wish I did. I would show you all if I did. But anyway, so we have about 15 minutes left. I wanted to open it up for any questions. It can be about the specific activities we did, or about values more broadly, or just about ACT overall. That's like a large door opening, but I'm happy to answer, and I'm sure Jen is too. So feel free to unmute and ask, or you can drop it into the chat. And I'll stop sharing the screen. Oh, but one more thing is just, I wanted to highlight our Facebook page in case anyone in the webinar does not like us already on Facebook. I actually think you all might already, but anyway, Facebook.
Values consistent. Julie loves outreach. So
I do love outreach. Anyway, okay, I'm gonna stop the share, and so we can do some more questions. And we might already have a question. Oh no, we don't, sorry.
So I actually have a question.
Yeah.
Jen, I know in the beginning you had mentioned that oftentimes we get these different organizations, whether they're family or societal, like impacts that make us feel as if we have conflicting values.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, how do you know when you have conflicting values? Like, how does that manifest? And because I can see that being a big hurdle, you know, trying to actually figure out your values versus your family's, friends, et cetera's values. You know, like, how do you move forward once you can identify, or once you identify that maybe your values that you're living into aren't necessarily your own?
Yeah. So I think that's a really great and very complicated question, because I don't think any of us will get through the rest of our lives without running into it, where at some point we aren't sure if we agree with the values of a specific structure in our life, or are like, I don't know what mine are because I've just been told this is the right way to do it. And so I think the first step is continuing to like take time with yourself to clarify what is meaningful to me, what do I care about, where do I want to spend my time. And then I think if I got your question correctly, and if not, Caitlin, you can clarify, but the idea of like, if I start to realize that my family members' values may differ, the cool part about ACT is you get to pick your values. I'm never going to come in and say like, nope, your parents are right and your values are wrong. Your values are yours and they help you live that fulfilling life. And so starting to find ways where you can still connect with family in ways that connect with your values. We don't have to get into a power struggle of, no, you all have to agree with my values or I have to fall into yours. But how can I still be in that context, or in contexts that my family might be, or that are important for me to be in, and still do the things that I care about? So or maybe it's connecting with a different value. So like in classes, I know that we have in our program alone, people from all walks of life with all different histories and backgrounds and diversity, which is amazing and so cool for learning. And I guarantee you none of us in that room have the exact same structure of values, but being able to find ways to say, all right, if my value is learning, maybe it's hearing the histories of my classmates and not judging them about it, but just kind of approaching it with curiosity. Or maybe it's giving someone else space to talk rather than myself. I'm a very talky person. So maybe it's doing that and realizing we're never going to be able to do all of our values at once, but finding ways to sort of shift in each context to still be connecting with something that you care about, while also saying like, it's more important for me to move in these directions than it is to get in this fight where it's like everyone has to have the same value system and it has to look the same way. I think we even saw great examples of this in some of the intentions you all shared. Is maybe we have overlapping values, but they look totally different in our different lives. So loving or connection might have shown up a couple different times, but we all had different intentions for that. So realizing that maybe it just shows up differently, or it's different for us, and being okay with that, like allowing the space for humans to all get to choose. And I think the thing that we would say as actors, as long as you're not stomping on someone else's values or oppressing them or like hurting someone else, then that's where that freely chosen space shows up. You get to decide, like, how am I going to connect with this? And I think context matters. Like sometimes I can't connect with my value of fun while I'm sitting in a business meeting or things like that. I was going to say now, but this is pretty fun for me, not going to lie. So yeah.
Another thing that I wanted to highlight too is that sometimes there can be values conflicts like within yourself. Like you might notice, I really care about like learning and knowledge, and I want to do more like schoolwork. And I also really care about like my relationships and my friends want to hang out. So something that might be really helpful like in that moment in terms of making that choice is thinking about your bullseye. And like maybe you spend a lot of time already with your friends and like you're not like as caught up on your schoolwork or vice versa, and making a choice based on that. Mm-hmm. And also noticing, is this really a true values conflict, or are the shoulds kind of pushing me around like, oh, I care about my friends, but I care about my schoolwork and I should be working, right? So sort of noticing that pull within yourself and allowing the values to act as a compass, which is like a big metaphor and act that we did not delve into today, but noticing, I guess, where that meaning is coming from and how you can contact that within yourself when choosing between a conflict within yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. As we mentioned, like we can't do them all perfectly all the time. We just can't as humans. And we can commit to the choice we're going to make in the moment. And so like Julie said, if you do choose to go hang out with your friends, really committing to that and saying, I'm going to be here now with my friends. And if you feel like the shoulds of I should do my homework are popping up, being able to kind of shift back to, and I can move in that direction later, and vice versa. But kind of as you're making that choice, saying which one can I commit to right now and feel fully in and take that step. And I think we need to bounce around. That's why we have so many different domains, because again, if we looked at my bullseye at different points in my life, I think maybe the education one, I'd be right in the bullseye, and everything else I'd be on the periphery. And so being able to say like, ooh, maybe I'm not doing that balance well. And so ideally we'd like to see all of them sort of moving closer. But if we have one that's clearly out and all the rest are in, maybe starting to question that a little bit.
Awesome. Does anybody else have a question? Can put it in the chat or be so bold to unmute.
You guys mentioned like thinking flexibly. So I'm wondering how we can maybe remember to do that or develop that flexible thinking in this context.
Yeah, I think thinking flexibly is just like a skill, I guess, that everyone is developing throughout their life. At least that's been my experience. So I think from what we've talked about, a great way to do that is to always try to connect to like the why am I doing this behind things, and kind of be on the lookout for shoulds. So sometimes like you do have to do certain things, like yes, you should be brushing your teeth, but oftentimes shoulds come up in ways that maybe are like a little bit more sneaky. So like I feel like I should be always available on my work phone, something like that, and thinking about really the root of that. So I guess what I would say really briefly is just sometimes taking a moment to just pause and be like, why am I doing this? And take that moment to either connect to a value or consider, is this really something that is taking me closer to my bullseye? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and one other thing I will say is I think connecting with other people, talking to them about their values, what they care about, and getting ideas, like you mentioned the flexibly piece. And I think especially in COVID, that's a huge thing that we often don't. I think we've narrowed to, like, we're so constricted. We don't have all these like options anymore. So to get some of that flexibility and creativity and ideas for how can I live this value out, talking to other people, seeing what they're doing. Also, it's amazing if you just Google, like, how can I connect with others, or how can I show someone I love them, or whatever your value might be. There's some really interesting ideas out there. I'm a big Pinterest fan, so you might find them there. But really, I think we are a pretty creative bunch of humans if we explore for that. And so starting to, we don't have to come up with all the ideas on our own. And there's probably a lot of ideas out there already. So in that sense, is like, if you notice like you're only engaging in this one set of behaviors and it's really starting to feel less fulfilling or less meaningful, saying like, how could I do this differently today? And maybe that's asking someone else what they've been doing if you know you are on the similar page, or Googling it or things like that. But that can be one way I've found that's really helpful to build that flexible repertoire.
Another, sorry to give another suggestion, but what Jen was saying just reminded me of something that I read about actually the other day about spending a day trying on a value. So that might be a way to really intentionally practice flexibility, saying like, today I'm really going to be very intentional and practice as much as I can valuing X. So it could be something that like you're not sure if you value it or not. So it could be like being practical or being compassionate, like really bringing that quality to everything you do. So that could be another way to really be flexible. I guess you're kind of like putting yourself in a position to be flexible, since it's approaching things in a way you haven't before. Any other questions? Well, well, this has been really fun. We really are grateful that you all showed up. And this is the first in a series of 3. So we have 2 more coming up. You can read about them on our lab's Facebook page or on the Sorensen Center for Clinical Excellence Facebook page. The next one coming up is about working with anxiety, and the one after that is about present moment awareness. But yeah, it's been really nice, and a link of the recording will be made available if people are interested. Thank you.
If any questions come up, or if anyone wants any of the resources that we use today, like the epitaph or the Bullseye, you can Google them. ACT is a really nice open source sort of community. And also, if anyone wants to contact Julie or I individually, I think probably most of you have our info. We're pretty easy to find email-wise, but I'm always happy to answer questions. So, yeah.
I just sent my email in the chat, and so if you would like a link of the recording, you can go ahead and shoot me an email, and we'll probably also be posting something on our social media with probably like a bit.ly link to the box link. So thank you so much to Jen and Julie. We have greatly appreciated the information that you shared and are excited to continue to work together in the next 2 parts of the series, and also get this webinar out to others. So please, if you get the link, share it with others share with others who you might think benefit from this.
All right.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.